What makes a good leader? What traits should I look for in people on my team to identify that next generation of leaders in my business? And then what type of development and coaching and input do I have to find and give to them in order to maximize their potential? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today on the You're in Charge podcast. I'm your host, Glenn Pasch, and each week we get together and we dive into the tips and strategies that will help you become the leader that you want to become, and how to overcome the challenges that face you every single day when you're leading your team. So today I have Bart Nollenberger. He is a John Maxwell trainer and partner in the organization, and he's been in the business of training for close to 40 years in automotive, outside of automotive. He's built programs and helped develop so many people and empowered them to become the leader themselves, and more importantly, help grow their people. And it's a fantastic conversation, very tactical. You're going to get a lot out of it. So let's not waste any time and let's dive into today's episode. Bart, thanks so much for joining me. As I said to you off camera, I've had these questions from my clients and just people in the industry. And I asked around, said, who can help me? Who can I have a conversation? And your name kept coming up. So again, I appreciate it very much that you joined me today.
Thank you, Glenn. So good to be here. I love having a cup of coffee with you.
Yeah, this is great. So the real crux of the conversation today is people are, I think, confused about when they hear the word leadership. Some people still think you're innately born with this skill. Leadership can't be taught. But I disagree. I think there are traits and skills that you can work on. Yes, you might be naturally inclined to communicate better than others. But for you, in all of your experience, your vast experience, what do you see as one of the struggles with identifying leaders, especially in the automotive industry?
Well, you know what's so interesting about that question? When you and I come from leadership, when we come from that word leadership, nowadays it's kind of like pivot and coach.
Right.
Everybody hears these words and they're almost watered down. And yet, when you think about when Maxwell first started years ago training on leadership, he was the first one to do that. I remember my brother, who was 5 years older than me and extremely successful in the financial services business. When I told him I was flipping from going in more practical details with salespeople to leadership, he says, "What's that really mean?" I mean,
Right.
here's a guy who's massively successful, has had a number of people work for him, but didn't really know what that meant. He said, "I don't know if that's something that's going to get their attention." And I think that's actually, it's really true. So we look at what's leadership mean to us? Do we want leadership in our salespeople? I don't know if we care as long as they sell cars, right?
Right.
Do we want it? Do we want it on the service line? Not really. Just give me a good dollar per RO.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's misunderstood in so many ways. John Maxwell, I've been with Maxwell physically since 2013 when I
Mm-hmm.
joined Maxwell Leadership, and I embraced everything they offered. I was that guy. Walked in the room, said, "I want to be part of this." And they said, "Here's a program, here's another, here's another." And I said, "Here you go, here you go, here you go."
Right. Right.
So as an entrepreneur, I built this Maxwell content, among others, that allowed me to take it into business. And of course, I've been in this business for 40 years, so why wouldn't I do that, right?
Right.
But I'm not real bright. So it took me about another 6 years of day rate in stores, of doing sales training in stores. And then 20 hit. And then it was that wake up call that now you get to teach leadership and dealership. And I get it. I get it. I'm not answering your question directly, but I'm going to land this plane. What I found was, what do dealers need? That was the thing. I stepped back. What do they need? These are my peeps. What do they need?
Right.
Well, they need to help their people be better leaders. So Maxwell talks about the 5 levels, right, Glenn?
Mm-hmm.
And level 1 position, level 2 is permission, level 3 is production. That 3 level is where we're at in the car business. A person doesn't stay in a car dealership unless they're a production ROI leader. They just
Right.
don't. They can be the nicest guy, but if they're not bringing, or woman, if they aren't bringing results, they're gone. We get that. And yet here's the missing link. And I do a survey with this with all my clients. I
Mm-hmm.
do boot camps, 12-week boot camps, 28-week boot camps. I do 1-year boot camps, all that on leadership. And here's the survey I do in automotive. Most of them are really, really, really good at production. They're not so good at building relationship. They're okay, some of them.
Right.
And and but they're not good at level 4. And level 4 is people development. And if we don't have people within our role as a manager that develop other people, they aren't a leader.
Right.
And if they're not developing other leaders, other people within, then the problem with that is we don't get results. So is there a magic pill? I think there is, man. I think we've blown it. And I think we've gotten lazy on hiring. I've heard some great people talk about what's the greatest way to hire somebody. Well, for one thing, I think number one, and I love DISC. I'm a DISC assessment guy. I've done DISC
Right.
all over the country. But when I bring up DISC to somebody that's a veteran car business person like you, they'll say, oh, yeah, I did that in my 20s. Now, you might not say that,
Mm-hmm.
but somebody else will. And yet, why does that matter? Because I have to know how to talk to Billy. I've got to know how to talk to Susie. But if I was hiring people and I want to make sure they succeed, I'm doing an in-depth emotional intelligence. Forget PI. I know some people are going to disrupt that. And that's okay. We all have our opinions. But emotional intelligence, why? Because emotional intelligence, the fact of the matter is, I've got one of the books right here, Optimal by Dan Goldman, who is one of the founders of emotional intelligence. He says, look, if you want people that are going to be more driven to make money, they better have high emotional intelligence, right?
Mm-hmm.
They better. So why would you and I? We want to hire a used car manager, but we don't check their emotional intelligence. And then we hire them and we wonder why they're throwing staplers at somebody's head.
Right.
or,
Exactly.
or cussing. We don't get it. Well, hello. That's where I want to know. I want to map. I want to know what they're like. And as a good leader, as a great leader, you're a great leader, I'm a great leader. Now I know what I have to work on. So let me land this, and then I'm going to please ask you to take over. 4 parts of emotional intelligence, if you don't know what they are, and I know you do, Glenn, but if our audience doesn't. Number 1, self-awareness. Now, I'm a ministry leader of a thing called Celebrate Recovery, a 12-step program
Right.
on recovery. I wrote a book called Keep the Change that takes those 12 steps and makes some leadership lessons. Step 1 is admit. If you and I can't admit our stuff, either at work or in the home life or in our personal, we are dead.
Right.
And we're certainly not going to be effective. So self-awareness. Step 2, self-management. If I know I've got an anger problem with my people and I don't spend a lot of time with them, but I don't do anything about it,
Mm-hmm.
then that's lousy self-management. Step 3 in emotional intelligence is social awareness. If I walk into a room, but I can't tell somebody that somebody gives me a dirty look and I get offended at that,
Right.
but that was just they got a bitter beer face, that's not very good social awareness.
Right.
And lastly, relationship management. I will tell you, I don't have clients. I have deep friends.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. And I call all my clients friends because my job, is just like it is in my private life, is to help them be better people.
Right.
My job in my ministry, my job at home, my job in my business, and my relationships are rich. If I don't have those, I'm dead. So why wouldn't we want to know that about everybody we're going to hire, or already works for us already, but there's something about them that keeps sabotaging and we can't figure it out? Give them an emotional intelligence test. That's what I believe is critical, and it's actually very simple.
Well, you've thrown a lot there now. So a lot to unpack there. So, and it all does make sense. My counter to this is there are people out there that will say, sounds great, but that doesn't work in automotive. Or, well, I never got that. So, and it could be in that situation, I didn't get it, so I don't know how to give it, or put, so how do you, and I like the steps is first admitting I need help, meaning I do want to accomplish this. I want to be a better leader for my people. Well, I need to go out and admit that I don't know and then take that next step to go find the help. So when someone's sitting in front of you or they're talking to you and they meet you and they say, this sounds fantastic. It'll never work in my dealership, or I can't do this, or I have old dogs, people, veterans, they won't respond to this. What's your counter to that? Because someone is sitting in the chair out there who says, I want to do this, or my dealership needs this. Now, maybe they're down a step or two in the pecking order and I have to go present this to someone and someone's going to say, it's not going to work. How do you load their lips? What do they say?
Well, I think there's a piece of this that you and I see in every human being, and that is there's always going to be those people that say it can't be done.
Mm-hmm.
But victors don't ask what can't be done; they ask what's our possibilities.
Right.
Right? Um, Earl Nightingale, years ago, talk about old school, right? Used to say, not used to say, but he put this in my head that write down 10 ways to do a better job at what you now do. That was something that when I was a young manager, I would do.
Right.
And the result of that, asking those questions, is I'm always looking for a better way. Tony Robbins says, we live in a box. We get in a box. We drive to a box. And we're in a box all day. And until one who has a business that is, if you're even asking yourself, what do I do to get better? It's because your business isn't where you want it to be.
Right.
Right? It's a great question. So when we ask that question, now we have to get out of the box.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next question is the old standby. How's that working for you? How's doing what you've always done work for you?
Right.
That doesn't work, probably because you never tried it. I will tell you, I've never ran a marathon. So I don't know if it would make me feel better or not. I've heard it does.
Right.
But if I don't try it, how will I know? One thing you mentioned that I think is really powerful, there's people watching this that might be on a different level in terms of leadership. But you're listening and saying, man, I want to be better. I'm tired of sabotaging my business. I know I can be better. I don't know always how to do it, but I want to be better. Then hit me up and do one on yourself. And then at least you know where you are and you know what you need to work on. Yes, corporately it'd be great if everybody did it. But as individuals, sometimes we got to pick up our mat and walk if we want to get to the next level.
No, but
So,
I
look,
think, sorry to interrupt, I think that's really important. And I want to make sure everybody highlights that because, I started this podcast because I found there were a lot of people who were put into a place or a position of leadership and then left to their own devices because there was no structure to train. It was either the assumption is, well, you are a great, let's say for automotive, it's an easy one. You're a great salesperson, so you must know how to run a team. And that may or may not be the right position for this person, but they're thrown into it. But what I really liked about what you said, and again, going back to the title of this, of you're in charge. And I think that word, I would challenge that a lot of salespeople, individual employees in their eco structure at work, when you say, well, you're a leader, they're going, no, I'm not. That's my boss. They're the leader versus saying, well, hold on a second. And you touched on it. When I go home, I might be the leader in my house, or I'm the leader of myself around this activity. In reality, you're a leader wherever you are. Just because you're doing different duties doesn't mean leadership is responsibility for yourself and your actions. And I think to your point is if more people looked at themselves as I'm the leader of my activities at work, I'm responsible for them, then the finger pointing, the blame, well, it's not my job falls away because your leadership is ownership.
so good. So good. Thank you. I knew there was a good reason why I wanted to be hanging out with you. So here's what I want to go back. Remember we talked about a level 4 leader?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I do these assessments, guess what percentage of managers, and this is nothing against managers. I is one.
Right.
It's nothing. I hate it when we get on these podcasts or whatever shows and we bash folks. This isn't about bashing.
No, not at all.
It's about let's put the mirror in front of us. Let's look at it and say, how can we be better? I'm built better than this.
Mm-hmm.
But let's go back to level 4. I've got a pill that will change it. I really do. If you and I, as leaders in a dealership, make a decision to be a level 4 leader, and that means we never cancel training. That means that we've got a training program in place.
Mm-hmm.
That means it's succinct. It's succinct. It means it's on the calendar. That means everybody knows. That means we're doing step 1, 2, 3, 4 as we go along. And we don't say, oh, it's the end of the month, we don't do training today. But we're consistent every day, every time, without fail. When we do that, shift happens. But here's the problem. I was talking to my good friend, love him, Drew Tutton. And I was asking Drew, if you're hiring a manager and you put him to work, what's one thing you want him to do more than anything else? And he says, train. I said, awesome. Now, Drew's been my client for a number of years. And I know the answer to this because I'm being silly with my English, but I'm that guy. And then my next question for most of us watching this, which I asked Drew too, although I knew the answer because it's me, who's training your managers?
Right.
And see, what's interesting about that is we train our managers to train salespeople, but they don't know how to train.
Right.
And then we hire, and look, I've got an LMS. It's really good. Right? It's really good. And yet I wouldn't just sell somebody an LMS without me being part of that relationship. I wouldn't do it. It's a waste of time.
Yes.
And we put salespeople out there watch our videos, wonder why they don't watch them. Managers have never watched them, or the managers say, I don't do that here. So let's train the managers to be great at training.
Right.
And so how do we do it? Well, we're succinct. We teach them how to be coaches. So what's that mean? Well, I've got a friend of mine. His name's Johnny. Johnny was a 30 car a month guy in mid-America. He finally got promoted. And he said to me when he got promoted, I'm so glad I got promoted because now I don't have to deal with people.
Right.
So he goes in his job. And I was doing sales training back then with these guys, but I watched what was happening. Mike is this guy sitting next to him. Mike's a great guy. Good thing about Mike, well, not good thing, but Mike is the kind of guy that sits on his butt all day, right?
Right.
And again, why? Because it's worked. He's a production guy. He gets $3,500 a car plus about $2,000 in the back. I mean, he's good. And Mike will take a break every 20 minutes and go out and smoke a cigarette and then come back and sit down. Guess who's training the 30 car a month guy that's now a manager?
Right.
It's Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Mike's kind of grumpy, man. He's been doing this a long time. Maybe you don't know anybody like this in the store, but he's been doing this a long time. So I was out of that store for a while. I came back to do leadership training, and I sat down with that guy, the salesman that got promoted, and he was grumpy.
Right.
I sat down and he was cynical. Man, we got to be really careful of who's training our managers.
Absolutely.
Who trains your kids during the day, right?
Absolutely.
Be careful about who trains your managers.
Well, that's, I think, the biggest disconnect as I work, and I've been traveling and working with clients and even through our agency work, is I see a lot of training for salespeople. I see a lot of onboarding, new hire training. I still think there's areas or disconnect where we'll put them through a week's worth of training, 3 days, whatever that, and then nothing else happens other than, to your point, is the morning meeting. And it's a lot of, make sure you do this. And everyone nods their head and goes out and says, I don't know how to implement this. I don't know how to do this. And really it's the one person out of the 10 that will, but they're naturally geared that way. And so they're struggling, but yet nobody trained that person how to run an effective meeting. No one trained somebody how to train. I believe, and I work with people to say there is a process to train people. And I did that conversation at NADA one time in a workshop, and someone came up to me afterwards. He says, you're the first person. He goes, I've been in this business for 25 years. You're the first person that ever said there's a process to train people. And I said, there is. It doesn't matter if it's a CRM, walk around, road to sale, whatever. It could, how to teach your kid to throw a baseball. Like, it's all the same. And he said, that's genius. And I said, and he said, I'm doing a disservice to my managers because I do a lot of telling. There's a lot of nodding heads. And then 30 days later, a lot of frustration. And we do it again. And we just talk more, nod our head more, and 6 months down the road, and then we give up and just say, well, this is the way it is. To your point, I guess it's the way it is, and we can't change because no one ever showed them how to change, how to implement. And I think it's implementation more than it is training, which people, think is classroom, or to your point, watching a video. To me, it's the lack of implementation, ongoing, refining, that idea of coaching someone to success, not here's the playbook and we hope we win on Sunday.
Yeah, that's so good. I'm all about change. And I will tell you that I'm where I was in my life. I'm obviously a little older, excuse the cough, but I was a mess. So I know change. I know
Right.
shift. I know how to be stupid. And I've got a master's in stupidity, and I've got a doctorate in dumbness. And now I get it. I've got a master's in giving. I've shifted. Now, I'm not trying to brag on me, of course not. But what I'm saying is, if I can change, anybody can change, right?
Sure.
Dude, when I first started as a sales manager, I was that guy. I hate to tell you this, Glenn. I'm being very vulnerable here. Brand new sales manager. Salesman made me mad because he, for the ninth time in a row, didn't turn somebody. And I picked up a stapler and I threw it. And fortunately, he ducked, but it hit the wall and it blew up into about 20 pieces. And he walked out. That's how I thought you're supposed to lead. And I know that doesn't happen today, but I do have a question. Do we have anybody in our tutelage that is harder to lead? That maybe doesn't want to get motivated by money, but gets motivated by time off.
Right.
Maybe they don't know what they want. Leadership today, managers that become leaders is more important than ever in our history. And see, Glenn, you're uh, you're you're brilliant. I'm not, but I'm a head guy, and I'm always looking about what's in here.
Mm-hmm.
I know what goes on here brings my results. So do you.
Right.
And what I do is I want to focus on leaders to be good head people so they can work on themselves so they can help their people grow their people. You can't grow if you don't grow. So
Absolutely.
let's talk about coaching, can we?
Absolutely.
It's another one of those darn words that's overrated. When you and I think about coaching, I just saw a new Netflix show last night with Steve Kerr and the Olympic team.
Mm-hmm.
We think Steve Kerr, we think Bill Belichick, we think Nick, we think all those. Great. They're facilitators, they're trainers, they're mentors, they're teachers. Absolutely. So when we think of all that, that's what we think a coach is. If you're out there listening to this, I have a question. Do you want to add performance to your people? Do you want to add to them? Of course you do. I believe there's a way.
Sure.
And you have to be an activator.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what in the world does that mean? You said it. One of my mentors, Glenn, you probably know him, is Jay Eustace Wolfington,
Mm-hmm.
the founder of Half a Car. And I worked for him for a number of years. He's a good friend of mine. He's been on my podcast a couple of times. He's brilliant, 92, brilliant. And Jay had a saying, a man or woman convinced against their will is of the same opinion still.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's that mean? I'm a high D personality. You come into my store, I'm the boss. I'm going to tell you how it is. You're wrecked. You do this, you're going to do that. Here's how you do a meet and greet. Here's how you do it. But we don't get them activated in their brain, right? And so they're not thinking. And the greatest responsibility for us as a manager turned leader is to get them to think. How do we do it? We ask them better questions.
Yes.
We start with an agenda. I have an agenda with Billy. My agenda is that I'm going to teach him how to be a great closer. Maybe that's his area. We look at what's the obstacles with Jimmy. Well, he talks too much. Okay. What are the options?
Mm-hmm.
And what action are we going to take after that time together? When we do that, then we do this. We listen, we ask, we're direct, and we build trust. There's a lot right there. I have a coaching program I just summed up in like 2 sentences.
Right.
But what I mean by that is we know what we're going to talk about when we go in,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a group or if it's individuals. And you know what we're going to talk about? Nothing. We're going to ask them questions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me ask you a question, Johnny. How do you think you best close? When you're in the close, what's the one thing that you think you need to do to get better? How's that working for you? What other options do you think you have? Now,
Right.
look, I get not everybody knows, and then we have to teach.
Hmm.
But there's a lot of people out there that know, but they're not doing. Why? Because they aren't actualizing it. They're not thinking. They're not processing through it. The quality of our life as a human being, as a leader, is determined by the quality of our questions. You said you wanted me to hold you accountable, James. How would you like me to do that? Johnny, you said you're struggling with making phone calls. What's your goal for making phone calls? 20? How are you going to hold yourself accountable to that?
Right.
Who do you want to be your accountability partner? How is that going to look? Get them 80% involved, right, Glenn?
Hmm.
And we talk less and they talk more. Shut up, ask, listen, ask,
So,
question, listen.
but to this again is that I just hear it in my head. The high D, the dominator, they're not going to be that person. They're just not built for that, because that takes patience and that takes listening. And a lot of times those people are flipped to the bottom page. Did we win or lose? They don't want to hear all of that. So in that, I totally agree with you. And I've always said, if you front load your training, if you invest that time, what you're talking about right now, you build trust, you build a language where later on it speeds up because you're both on the same wavelength. They know what to expect. They appreciate the questions versus, why are you asking me these questions? Are you firing me? Right? They understand it, but that takes an investment, planting seeds to win them over. So there are going to be people who say, I don't have time for that. They should know that. They should know. They've been in the business for a while, which is so in a dealership, then what are the traits of a trainer? Because that leader at the top may not have the time due to their workload or the skill set to do that. If someone said to you, well, that's not me. I'm the punch in the face, tell you what to do. I don't have time for that. Where do we find that coach? What are the skills that we should be identifying with them? Because maybe they're not the top performer. They're the 3/4 of the top performer. But I always look at it as, at least a gauge for me, and I'd love your opinion, is if that leader wasn't there today, who do the salespeople go for questions? Right? Because that person probably is approachable, patient, willing to help, and I'd lean on that person first. So I think there's people out there going, that's not me, but who in my dealership should do this training and coaching?
And I listen to Clubhouse every week, and I hear a lot of high Ds that really want to espouse their knowledge, and they have a ton of it. I mean, they're brilliant, and I get that. I've got a leadership team here, and I've got a ministry. And in both cases, it's pretty interesting. I'm a high I, an S, and a D. If you don't know what that is, you'll have to Google it. But I'm enthusiastic, I'm passionate, not very good listener, but I have that S characteristic that really cares about people and listens
Mm-hmm.
very well and finishes things. So thank goodness I have it. Because I have a podcast, my X characteristic has gone way up. And I also have a D characteristic that under pressure, I just get it done. I'm believing there's not one person on the planet that doesn't want to change something.
Mm-hmm.
And I go back to what we said about admit. Matthew McConaughey was on a show one day and he asked that same question: what do you need to admit? If I'm a leader at a dealership, I didn't get there by accident. I'm driven. I'm focused. I know what I want, but I also know my weaknesses. And I get that sometimes I've got to see if I can manage my weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
And other times I got to turn it to somebody else.
Right.
I'm a high I. My number one person in both my business and my ministry is a high C. And if you know anything about high C, they're detail oriented, they're
Yep.
introverts, and they don't always express emotions. And for me, I'm an emotional guy, as you can
Right.
see, I'm all over the place. But I need that person, and they're my best friend in my businesses.
Sure.
And I wouldn't be where I am without them. And yet, if one of my people said, Bart, you're not listening well, I want to learn about how to listen better.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I know is I don't grow people unless I know myself, unless I decide to grow myself. So what's that mean? How do we answer the question without me dancing? Which I don't think I am, but I want to land that. I believe in that. What happened with me back in 20 is I decided I wanted to do these boot camps called Developing the Leader because I knew there was dealers and general managers and owners that wanted to develop themselves as well. I listened to Marshall Goldsmith and how he coached Alan Mullally when he left Boeing and went to Ford, and I realized that's what I want to do. That even Alan Mullally, who was successful but going to a brand new environment,
Right.
knew he needed a coach. So part of what we do is we do assessments for all the people that are coming in to our coaching, and we assess what other people are saying about them. And I would tell you, if it's a blind assessment, as you know, and somebody sees that, and they might be full of ego and full of pride, but when they see that, they can look at that and say, I guess I need to look at that
Right.
if I'm going to be a better human.
Mm-hmm.
Not always, but a lot of times they will. I can't tell you how many times I've done boot camps for middle managers and the dealers and general managers are in the boot camp. I can't tell you how many times I've done a boot camp for a GM that's running 2 stores, and he comes back to me and says, man, I'm a good leader. I follow Maxwell as well, but I didn't know how to be a good father,
Right.
and I didn't know how to be a good husband. So that to me touches my soul. That's when I know I'm doing the right thing. So again, if somebody doesn't have a want to and a why, they're never going to shift.
Right.
But within our organization, there's always somebody there that has a skill set maybe we don't have, that can train the trainers or train the people that need to be trained.
Yes.
But last thing on this, when I asked what are you doing to train the trainers, the key to be a great activator is groups are great. We got to have groups. But Glenn, you and I get this. It's the hard work, but it's the one-on-ones.
Absolutely.
I've been in process, and you have too. We've been in the middle of changing lives because of one-on-ones. We have people share with us the things they should never share within that environment because they don't have anybody to vent to.
Mm-hmm.
And it changes their life, and they feel better about themselves. They feel better about themselves. They're going to be feeling better about other people, and they're going to want to help other people. And yet, I've noticed, here's what happens. If we've got a 12-week session and we said, we're done,
Mm-hmm.
people can regress so quickly.
Sure.
And if you think that they don't need constant, just like your salespeople do, we're missing the boat. But the life change happens in one-on-ones. They could be 20 minutes a week and then 5 minutes every day.
Absolutely.
But that's where life changes. That's
No,
where
and
performance.
I think that's the failure of a lot of trainers that I've trained or I've been in environments is I think you hit on it very clearly is we have our 12-week class or our 1-week training or whatever, and it becomes hyper focused and everyone's talking about it every day. And it's really, really important. And then, especially in automotive, the next week, it's the next thing that's super important. And, I came from hospitality working in restaurants. And I remember one time where, it was an upscale restaurant and when they were doing a wine raffle, like trying to push a new wine. And they said to all the waiters, anybody who, we're going to have a month-long contest, which I learned afterwards, that's too long for a contest, but it was a month-long contest and whoever sells the most gets XYZ. But every day we talked about it. Every meeting we talked about it. Every day we walked about results for 7 days. And in that second week, sales went down, except for 1 or 2 people who were saying, I'm going to win it because everyone else is sleeping. They were geared that way. They saw the opportunity. But what it taught me was wherever the focus of the leader is where the focus of everyone else is. And the moment you leave that first initiative, people don't think it's as important anymore. So what I try to remind them is it's this idea of stacking. We still talk about it. It may not be the focus of the meeting, but we're going to still ask for that metric every day. It's now part of our daily meeting. And now we're going to stack this on top. If not, you're right. It drifts away and we've all heard it. Oh, we used to do that. Oh, that used to be something. And oh, that worked in the past. And my brain goes, then why did you ever stop it? It's probably because it was no longer a focus or discussed or inspected. So no one thought it was important. And we all want to please leaders. We all want to please the parents. So we'll do whatever it is that gets their attention. and that no longer is, so it's no longer mine.
Love that. That is so powerful right there. We want to please them on a subconscious level. We want to please them or
Sure.
rebel,
Sure.
but please, for the most part, please them. That's so good. I love the stacking too. I think that's fantastic. I think that, again, I think one of the problems is we're so ROA focused.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing, nothing, nothing. We get it. But I've got a good friend of mine. His name's Joel Manby. Joel wrote the book Love Works. And Joe was the CEO of Saab. He was second command with Saturn. And he was in automotive for a long time. And then he went to work for Herschel Family Entertainment, who
Mm-hmm.
owns Dollywood and a number of other, I
Right.
think that and he was the CEO of SeaWorld. And he learned how to lead different. And this is going to be kind of weird, but it's not. It's so true. He said this philosophy of leading different allowed him, after he got out of automotive, he saw it, but he didn't learn it in automotive because it was a different
Sure.
mindset in automotive. But he said, after I got out of automotive and I worked for the Hirschfelds and I realized how they led with love,
Mm-hmm.
he said, I realized you can do that. Now, I'll tell you what he said. Here's what he says. He's got, first of all, be patient, be kind, be trusting, be forgiving, all based on First Corinthians. Now, he's a person of faith, so am I, but it works for everybody. Those
Sure.
are just good values for humans.
Mm-hmm.
So, patience, you mentioned patience. Admonish in private whenever possible.
Sure.
Anybody, if somebody doesn't have patience, they can do that. Be stern, but avoid malice.
Mm-hmm.
Even if somebody's not patient, they can do that. That's just good emotional intelligence, right? Be specific. Get people back on the horse with pointed praise. Lift them up. As Ken Blanchard said, catch them doing something right. As
Sure.
Stephen Covey says, emotional intelligence, I mean, emotional deposits, right? And the last thing is move on without a grudge. And that's what he talks about. He talks about being kind, show encouragement. He says it's okay to be firm. Kind doesn't mean weak.
No.
Kind's firm. It's just not rude. It's just not abusive.
Well, if you and on that, what I've shared with people is focus on the actions, not the person,
So good.
right? Because if I focus on the actions, you were supposed to do X, Y, and Z. You did X, Z, 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 Z. That doesn't make you a bad person. As soon as I move to, and we've heard it, that person's lazy. They're not nice. They're rude. Now I'm focusing on the person versus what are the activities that they did. Because again, to your point is it can be very specific.
Mhm.
It's about activity. Is that it's not about, well, you didn't know. It's either I don't know how to do it, I forgot how to do it, or I'm choosing not to do it for some reason. That's where we have to uncover, not the person. And to all of that is it goes back to focusing on actions, not people, helping guide them. So you can be firm, just like your children. You can be firm, but you're not saying, oh, you're a horrible kid. You're just saying, how many times have we talked about cleaning up your room? Let's go back and do it. Let me show you again. Now I'm going to hold you accountable. And if they don't do it, you dive into why they're not doing it. You don't immediately go, you're fired, get out of my house. You're being fired as my kid. But for some reason, when we get to adulthood, we forget all of that. And I think if we
Yeah.
lean more back into that, because in my mind, that's the way we were all trained either in school, how we were taught, showing them feedback, how we were raised as children, how we were coached in Little League, a lot of showing, a lot of empathy, a lot of pats on the head, effort, right? Not, oh, you're a horrible kid. But somewhere as soon as we become an adult, we think we train people. People, for some reason, we think learn completely differently. And reality, we don't. And if we leaned back into how we were trained or coached or mentored as younger and bring it back, I think we'd have much more impact on the people we're coaching.
John Maxwell says that so well. He says, we are people of value,
Mm-hmm.
you and me, adding value to people of value.
Mm-hmm.
Now, um, I'm a people person. I'm a relationship person. I need people to count my money for me, and I have that. They're brilliant. And I admit that. Tony Robbins was all about the people, not the money. And unfortunately, at one point in time, somebody stole his money, but he
Right.
got a different person that got his money. So my point of that is, I get you're listening to this and you're a high D, and you're all about results, and you're probably very successful. But you also have people that if you did a survey on you that would say you don't listen very well. And I'm guessing, everybody's got
Right.
stuff. I
Right.
don't
Right.
listen very well sometimes, but you don't listen very well. Maybe sometimes you're too harsh, all that. That would be good for us to know. And I think what's so cool about going through 12 weeks with people in a group of 5 or 6 and then meeting with them one on one is they get to open and crack open, at least in group. They might open,
Mm-hmm.
but definitely in one on one they open up with what they need to admit, what they need to grow on, because everybody wants to grow, especially achievers. I think about kids with all this, though, right? I have 4 kids. My wife and I are blended. Between the two of us, we have 10 kids and we have 14 grandkids. Dude, they're all different.
Right.
But I have incredible relationships with every one of them. Why? Because I'm flexible. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a people person, but not all my kids are. So, so because of that, does that mean I don't have a relationship with them? Of course not. It means I speak to them in the way that they need to be spoken to.
Right.
I understand the way they need to be spoken to. Why does that change when we do our business? We still have people. Without people, until you tell me we don't have people anymore, that might change everything. But while we have people and we're dependent on people, why wouldn't we be people of value who add value to people of value? And then when they go home at night, they don't say, man, my boss is a jerk. They say, you know what? My boss told me something today was a little harsh, but he got me to think, and I learned a lot today. So there's 4 questions that I teach all my coaching clients. I have a bunch of them all in automotive. Actually, some are in my recovery ministry too. But
Mm-hmm.
these are 4 questions that I start the day with. And it's very simple, Glenn. It's not like, I went to Ohio University, right? They're very simple. So here's the first question. What do you do right today?
Mm-hmm.
Because I realize that Levi Lusko would say 87% of us have low self-esteem, at least about something. So when you and I ask our people that, hey, Billy, what did you do right today? Well, you know what? I did good in my phone calls.
Yep.
Way to go. Hey, Susie, next question. Number 1, what do you do right? That's huge because and what we do normally is tell them what we did wrong.
Sure.
Let's catch them doing something right. Number 2, what did you learn?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. Jalen Hurts 2 years ago lost the Super Bowl, and that's what he said on the podium.
Mm-hmm.
2 years later,
Yeah,
he
absolutely.
wins MVP. So I love learning. I ask myself that all the time, and I learn a lot. Tony Robbins says there's no such thing as failure, there's only results. And we get results if we ask that question. So, number 1, right. Number 2, learn. Number 3, what must I change?
Mm-hmm.
What must I change? Well, when we must do something, we'll change it.
Right. Tony
So
Robbins
those
always
three
says that you don't change until
things.
you really have to.
Yes.
When
And, I didn't want to give Tony another plug, but you're
That's all
absolutely
right.
right. That's
Listen,
what
he was a early, very someone who was very inspiring, and that always stuck with me. Out of all of his things, where we can convince ourselves we don't have to until we have to, and the problem is a lot of times it's life changing. Where if you don't smoke, you're going to. If you don't stop drinking, right? So it ties into recovery. If you don't lose weight, it's there's no more options. And I think it doesn't have to get to that, but by asking yourself that each day, it can be little things. Like
yeah.
I didn't, well, what did I do? Well, I did this. Well, what must I change? Well, I have to do that behavior every day
Yeah.
because it worked.
Yeah. And, it reminds me, I wasn't even thinking of this. There's one more question I want to share with you. Write, learn, change. Those are the 3 if you're trying to think about them. Alex Flores, a friend of mine, owns a bunch of stores in Texas, and he's
Mm-hmm.
got those written on the glass walls in the sales tower, because he wants the guys to think about that.
Right.
I've got coaches that ask that every night, guys, before they check out. What do you do right today? What do you learn? What must you change? They're conditioned to walk in the office. Hey, Glenn, here's what I did right today.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Glenn, here's what I learned today. Here's what I must change, Glenn.
Right.
Well, they're conditioned. But what I'm reminded of is constant and never-ending improvement.
Sure.
And Toyota talked about that for years. Tony Robbins calls it Kaizen. Or no, Toyota calls it Kaizen. Tony calls it Can I? And I think that you and I get, if we're not, we all get, if we're not going forward, we're going backwards, man. And if we're not growing, if we think that we can't do something, we better look in the mirror and say,
Right.
must we do? I guess if business is great, like it was in 20, we don't have to ask many questions.
Right.
But this is not those times.
No, no, we have to now.
One more question is
Sure.
this. There's a lot of victims out there in this world. And people want to point fingers at everybody else. And we see it in the car dealership as an example of the society.
Hmm.
And this last question I think is huge. It saved my marriage. What's my role in this?
Right.
Anytime that you and I have a conflict, anytime we're not communicating with Susie very well, anytime they're not growing enough, look in the freaking mirror
Hmm.
and ask yourself, what's your role in that?
Right.
As a person who's a leader, wants to be a leader, who wants to grow, wants to own a store someday, maybe he wants to be a general manager, maybe is happy with being a top
Hmm.
salesperson, whatever the role is, you and I, when we ask that question, the brain's going to tell us our role. And I remember the first time I asked that question, I was having a beautiful discussion with my wife, a little heated. And I said, "Excuse me, please." And I walked in the closet, literally, Glenn, and I said, "Okay, what's my role in this?" I got the answer. I walked out and I said, "Mary, here's my role in that." And it changed everything
Absolutely.
because instead of walking in anger, it made me hold myself responsible. And great leaders are great at holding themselves responsible.
Man, that is great. I could talk to you all day. I really appreciate that. And I think that's a really great point for us to end on. And so I usually ask just a couple questions that to get to know the person. So for you, you've traveled a lot. I always like to know what people like. Like, is there a place that you haven't been to that you're dying to get to?
Bora Bora. Have you been there?
Have not. No.
Oh my gosh. I would love to get one of those little hatch
The ones out on the
condos, right?
walk out on the water.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Those look
Yep.
awfully great. Um,
I'll never retire, but I figure if I do, I'm going to be setting up beach chairs somewhere in the South Pacific.
Doing Zoom meetings in between setting up
Exactly.
chairs. There you go. All right. Second question. What's a hobby or a skill that you have that nobody would really, that people would be surprised that you have?
Oh my gosh. Um, I think that's such a great question, but I'm a reader, man. I love to learn. And I don't think anybody'd be surprised because I mentioned 12 books every time I have a conversation with somebody. But I really love to read. I just want to get better.
Good for
I
you.
spend a lot of time wasting time, and I just want to get better. We started this ministry in 2022, and we tried to start it in 14, but it just didn't work. And I've got over 40 years of sobriety, so it was kind of the journey I was on. And but when I wanted to start they asked me actually in 22 to start it. And when they asked me, I said yes, because I knew I was supposed to do that.
Right.
And it is hard because there's nothing like leading volunteers that are in recovery. But they're the most incredible souls on the planet.
Yes, they
I have,
are.
I have the greatest leadership team. And because of this, in June, I get to go to Zambia and teach leadership and recovery to Zambian men that have some issues. And I get to do, by the grace of God, some work to really help them with that, with their inner demons. And I'm excited to be able
Well,
to do that.
that is phenomenal, phenomenal. You are doing great work
Mm,
for a lot of people, and I really do appreciate your time. So tell the people, tell the audience, and we'll put it all in the show notes. If they want to reach out to you, connect with you, an audience, I think you should. And if you didn't get something out of this episode, then shame on the two of us. But where can they connect with you, find your website, social media, that type of information?
Thank you. I'm on a website, BartNollenberger.com, and it's being revamped by our good friend Michael Cirillo. So we're excited
You're
about
in good
that.
hands. You're in good hands.
Yes, what a great soul he is.
Yes, he is.
And I've got I'm on all the socials. If you want to get a hold of me, my phone number is 480-327-8751. I'd love to talk to you. And what I want to do for you, if you're an individual and you just want to hang out for 15, 20 minutes and get some direction, I'd be honored to do that. So call me. And also, if you're a dealership and you want a sales meeting or a leadership meeting online, I would love to do that. And I would love to take you through a 1 hour develop the leader workshop so you can see the essence. And what I always say to folks, send your salespeople to develop the leader workshops as well.
Right.
Because there's so many times that we don't train them on anything other than what they're on. If they're a 20 car a month person and you're seeing that they're going to be in a different seat, teach them how to be a leader. So when that time comes, they don't have to listen to Mike sit next to them and learn bad habits.
No,
So
I think that's
highly
great.
recommend
Yeah, I listen, I think that's a great recommendation. You're investing because sometimes you don't realize who's the right leader until you start investing in them because you might have someone you think is the right person. And once they start training you, ooh, they're not the right person. And you'll uncover some gems in your business or your dealership and you'll look back and go, I never thought Bart would have been the one, but I'm so glad I invested. So fantastic. So we'll put all of that in the show notes for everybody. Again, Bart, thank you so much. So audience, you know the drill. At the end of every episode, we ask you to share out this episode. I'm sure there's people in your network that can benefit from what Bart and I are talking about. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, click the notification so you don't miss on any of the podcast platforms too. Leave us a review. Also leave comments because I can share them with the guests. Sometimes that's where we get some great ideas for future episodes. Ultimately, you know, we appreciate the attention because I know there's a lot of places for you to watch content and consume content, but the fact that you spend time with Bart and myself means the world to me. And as I say at the end of every episode, you know, being a leader is not the title. It's what Bart just said. It's about impacting, activating other people. So make sure you do it. I think Bart has one last word to share with everybody, and then we'll see you next week. Go ahead, Bart.
Thank you. My email, Bart at BartNollenberger.com. You can see how to spell it there. Also, I will give you, just email me, a 5 levels of leadership assessment so you can assess yourself on where you are as a leader. It's my gift to you. Again, Glenn, thank you. You're such a legend, and I really admire you, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you so much. It was great spending some time with you today. As always, folks, see you next week. We're here every week to help you become the leader that you want to be. See you next time.